Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Garais, your laboratory facilitator for BIO111 laboratory. And if you click on announcements, I will be putting this video here for the February 3, 2023 laboratory so that, when you get into laboratory, you can just, more self-directed so you have a better idea instead of me eating some time doing my spiel and probably talking about some nonsense. I also put more anatomical structures than the original instructions. So I took the instructions and I enhanced them. And that's here. So let's double click on that. Bring this up. And essentially, let's follow the instructions. And also, this will be providing a little bit of extra review regarding what does week 3's and you can see that you can tell this is my version. It's the same thing, but I added a little bit some stuff here we're going to talk about. And one of the things I added is the actual names of the different sections and reviews that we're going to be looking at. And if you look at number 17, you still have to color stuff in for the laboratory, but I wrote them all down and I was a little bit more specific. For example, the skull, not just the skull, there's different bones. Well, I believe they call occipital frontalis, but frontalis is the frontal part. And then I just added some extra bones in there. The thoracic cage, I added also, more specific things because I'm sure Professor Lawrence gave you these lectures regarding true and false ribs and folding ribs. I get asked that on a practical examination. I could ask for you to identify vertebrae. And in this video, we'll cover all of these structures. Okay? And of course, your wrists and your ankles, your metacarpals and metatarsals. And of course, some bones that, from the posterior view, like your scapula, and of course your clavicle, which is part of your shoulder girdle. And last but not least, you should be able to identify appendicular versus apical or axial. I think that's the word that they were really trying to put there. I should correct that. I will. So appendicular skeletal system, which is your appendages, which is your arms and legs, and including your shoulder girdle and your hips, and your axial skeleton, which is your skull and vertebrae, and of course your thoracic cage, which is your rib cage. So let's start from the very beginning. So in teams, it goes by group. You open up, should be on the cadaver on a full male Asian, and we're going to go through the types of dissections or sections. So here we're of course in anatomage. How do we turn it on? If I ask, it's the button here on the side, right? And what's the icon we use to open this up? Of course, table.edu. Double click on that. This should appear, and in about 90 seconds or so, you should have it up. So you can fast forward to this. And as a quick review, remember your menus. Of course, we're going to go to cadavers, functional anatomy if you have any of those animations, histology if we're looking for microscope or histological slides, and last but not least, prosection, those 3D photographs of specific high resolution anatomy. Okay. So we're going to hit cadavers, and we wanted male Asian. So male full body Asian, it's this one. Double click on that. And you can fast forward this part. because this is the part it takes a while. Do, 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 do. Dang it, there's more. Again, fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. Look at the pretty brain, central nervous system, with all its sulcus and gyri. And then here comes the skeletal system, which we're very most interested in. And for laughs, maybe I'll put in a quiz that you can practice on, utilizing most, if not all, the structures that I talked about previously. That's creepy. Look at your intestines. Got your liver there. A little bit of your stomach. Small intestines. Large intestines. You know he's male. Confirmed. I have little to no patience today. Whoa, 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 whoa. Almost there. Ubicularis oculi and ubicularis oris. For all the dental people in the room, he's got pretty good choppers. But again, what did we do? The anatomage, they scanned it and then they cleaned it up. And here is our Asian male. And we look at our instructions. Let's go back to our instructions. We open up the Asian male and it says the first thing to do is to form a mid-sagittal section. And let's look at the three sections, transverse and coronal. And how do we do that? Now, how do you do that? If you recall, in the lower left hand corner, right there, you have the blue dissection tool. So I hit that, and then you have these three buttons. This first button is mid-sagittal. Mid-sagittal section cuts my patient into equal left and right. Then you have your coronal that cuts my patient into equal front and back, or anterior, posterior, or ventral, dorsal. And transverse cuts my patient equally into a top half or a superior half and a bottom half, which is your inferior half. So now this button here switches which view, left or right, and of course the undo button. This, I don't know what this is. Never touched it before in my life. Let's mess with it and find out. But let's look at our assignment first. So the first thing is what? Mid-sagittal. So I'm gonna ask, hey, can you put me in, oh, not me, but can you put our cadaver in a mid-sagittal? Sure. Sure, doctor. Right here. And then, remember what we learned about the power of the finger? We could do what? Take one finger, drag it around, and then 2 fingers, I can move it a little bit more towards the center. And now you have the mid-sagittal view. Nice thing about mid-sagittal view, remember when you were lectured, the cavities. Ooh, what's going on here? I guess the animations were left on. Remember, for red is oxygenated, blue is deoxygenated. That's interesting. I don't know how that was left on, but it is. Okay, so on this view, I could ask questions about the cavities because you learned about the cavities. Of course, the cavity holding your brain, of course, is the cerebral cavity. And then you have back here the spinal cord, and that's the spinal cavity. Up here, you can see the thoracic cavity with the heart, and it is demarcated from the abdominal cavity through this thin muscle right here, and that is your diaphragm. Okay, and then you have your abdominal pelvic area, which is all together. The covering of the abdominal pelvic area is, of course, your peritoneum, And of course, the covering of your lungs is called your pleura. The covering of your heart is called your pericardium. Okay, and if you noticed, right, you have 1 thoracic, 2 abdomen, 3 pelvic cavities anteriorly in my patient, and the 2 posterior ones, which is the central nervous system, which is my brain, and then my spinal column. And you could also see here as well, the cartilage in between these cartilages are called intervertebral discs. We're going to see them again. And that's the vertebrae. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the vertebrae as well. So this is the mid-sagittal section. And if we click on that button, this is the button that we chose. Now what would happen if I did this? Right? Then I would move, I'm actually turning my patient around automatically, right? Without having to use my finger. But either way, you can, and you can move your finger out. Now, if I want to bring it back to normal, I will go do the undo button, and now my patient is back to this view, but I could also ask, using this button, put it back to normal, which is anterior / supine view, because I'm looking at my patient anteriorly and my patient is lying down on this table in the supine position. So let's try the next one. I click this button again, and then the next one would cut my patient into equal front and back, which is the coronal section. So that's one way to look at it. Okay. It's a nice coronal section of the brain. You see the white matter and the gray matter, and remember, the white matter is full of fat. What do I say remember? You guys didn't have that lecture yet. I could put this back to normal, like so. Press the blue dissection tool again, and what can I do? I can have a transverse view. And you can see here, it cut this patient into an equal top and bottom, and then I could do what? Take my finger, drag it, and then we could see a transverse view. So transverse separates my patient into a top half and a bottom half. Now, let's bring everything back to normal. The blue dissection tool also has this function. Remember, we saw this last week. Blue dissection tool, also known as your clipping tool. See, it's already colored blue. So if I want to do a transverse or some whatever weird cut that I want to do in other parts of the body, I can. So for example, I have the blue dissection tool or the clipping tool already activated. I can drag my finger in just whatever way I want, and you'll see a blue line forms. Then you get rid of the part that you want to remove. So I want to remove the top of his head because that's where I dissected. I click on that. Then I'll move my patient. And then we can see what? That very odd, very different view. Okay? And again, to put it all back to normal, and that. And then click on the orientation button, click on that. And then we could see now my patient is where? Back to normal, to the supine anterior view. Okay, so those are you'll be responsible for those 3 different kinds of sections. Let's now go to the instructions. Let's just do my password again. Sorry about that. Okay, we're back here. Rotate the body, reveal the internal structures. We went through that. Blue dissection tool. We can undo the cut. We did that. How to turn the body back to normal. We did that. Now, we already talked about remove the skin last and how to isolate different sections. So let's say we just want to remove his skin. Right, I press the eyeball tool, which is the visibility tool, and I just want to remove the skin. And if you look here, I have integumentary lymphatic. There's the whole list. So if I want to move that, I just click on that. And then what happened? Let me close this box out. Then what happened to the whole thing? We removed all the lymphatics and removed all the integumentary, which is the skin, right? And then we could now go through the skeletal system. So remember how to do that. We have my visibility tool. I press on that. It's the bottom. Then it's going to come up this. Then I want to get rid of everything. That's this bottom and the bottom. Gets rid of everything. And then the only thing I want is skeletal. Oopsies, it's a little bit slow. Hold up, maybe if I use my right hand. Hold up, technical difficulty. You can fast forward through this part. Okay, let's start from this. I have this, I go to my visibility tool. This comes up, right? I want to get rid of everything except skeletal. So I get rid of everything. I clicked on that button, and then everything disappears. Our patient disappeared. And then we click on skeletal. Let me get rid of muscle. There you go. And a little bit of a snafu. And you can see here. And this is the screen view. All right, so we go back to our instructions. We unchecked all the boxes, we have skeletal, and we could label the structures using the pen tool. Okay, so let me show you the pen tool. But what is better than the pen tool? Well, here's the pen tool. If you're looking at here, it's on the left-hand side, and I click on it, and I pick a color, any color. I like red, right? Then when you click on red, you can draw things. Hello. Okay, you can draw and label. And you want to get rid of everything. I'll hit this trash can and then say yes. I want to get rid of it. You could use the pen tool, but the assignment today is, if you saw, label and color the following structures. So let's go through the first couple of them, and then you guys can do the rest. The first one we're looking for is the humerus, the funny bone, and we want it pink. So the first thing you do is, first of all, you find the humerus. And your humerus is your upper arm, right? And my upper arm, the funny bone, is humerus. And my patient has a right one and has a left one. So you can have people do right and left, but we want them pink. So I go down here to my color wheel. Once I've chosen this, so I choose that, it'll give it like this, like white color. Then I go here and I want it pink. So I go to my color wheel. And when my color wheel opens up, if you look at this menu, you're trying to hit this corner right here, right? So I try like hitting all the way up there. And then we wanted it pink. So, am I colorblind? Oh, here it is. Here's pink, I guess. I was looking for like hot pink or fuchsia, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. And then, once I hit that color, I can close it. And then now my humerus is what? Colored pink. Right? And then when I click outside of it, then the annotations or the label goes away. Then we could do that for, what's the next one? Femur. And your femur, largest, longest, long bone in your body, is right here. Again, wash, rinse, and repeat. I chose it. What am I going to do? I go back here to my color wheel. And then I wanted it green. I try to click right up here in the corner. And then we pick, let's pick this green right here. And you can see there, the right femur. I click outside of it, disappears. So you'll be doing that. Wash, rinse, and repeat. And, have every person do like one or two. And I believe there's 5 of you. And then do all of these. Now, let me go through the thoracic cage since I added those. Oh, the skull as well. Let's look at some of the bones of the skull. Look good. Now, the frontalis, of course, or your, I should correct that. It's the frontal bone, not the frontalis. Frontalis is the muscle. Silly me. If I click on that, of course, it's frontal. Then I have my cheekbones. That's my zygomatic. Then I have my jaw, mandible, the upper part, maxilla. I turn my patient a little bit to the side. You can see there's temporal bones here, and there's parietal bones. You got a pair of them up top. You look at it this way, right? And then let's look, and of course, let's make our life easier. I'm going to use this so I can look at the posterior view of my patient. And if you look at the back part, you have your occipital bone in the back. So those are the ones: your frontal bone, parietal bone, temporal bone, zygomatic, which is your cheek, mandible, which is your jaw, and your maxilla, which is the upper part of your face, underneath your eyes. Now the next one, let's look at the thoracic cage, which you're gonna color pink. So let's look at the thoracic cage, and you can see it goes to the back. So hit this again. Now we're in the front. So if we're looking at the thoracic cage, let's get a pointer out so I can point stuff. So looking at our list, let me back up a little as well. When we're looking at our list, we want the manubrium sterni, which is our breastbone. So if I'm looking at the thoracic cage, the breastbone is here, right? And that's your sternum. But the sternum has three parts, as you can see. 1, 2, 3. The top part is your manubrium sterni. The middle part is your corpus or body. And the cartilage part at the bottom, for those of you who had CPR know, that's your xiphoid process. That's where you put your two fingers there and you measure up. And this is where you put your palm here on the corpus of your sternum, right? And that is your breastbone. You have your clavicle here, which is part of your shoulder girdle. And here's you got to look in the back view, but we'll look at that more later. Now, let's look at the ribs. If you noticed that the ribs, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Do you see how 1 through 7, they're all connected into the corpus of the manubrium sterni in the front. Oh, by the way, all this white stuff is cartilage. Postulate that for yourself. Why in heaven's name do we have to have cartilage on my thoracic cage? It's a little side question. So if you look at those ribs are true ribs because they connect into the sternum. Now, your 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, right, because you got 12 ribs, are called false ribs. Because the 8, 9, and 10, if you see here, 10, 9, and 8, oopsies, right, the one in the arrow is 8, they all connect into the cartilage of 7. And of course, let's look at this. Let me move my patient around. Let me get rid of the pointer. That's why I can't move stuff. If I move my patient around, if you look at the two ribs protecting your kidneys in the back, that's ribs number 11 and 12. Those are floating. Those are also part of the false ribs. So to review, 1 through 7, ribs 1 through 7, true ribs. Ribs 8 through 12, false. Ribs 11 and 12 are floating, which answers our questions here. Do you know which ribs are true? Which ribs are false? Which ribs are floating? Now let's look at vertebrae. And it's better to look at the vertebrae from the opposite view. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to look at this. Now, if you look at, let's turn it a little bit akimbo here. If you look at the 7 vertebrae in our patient's neck, they're kind of thin and they're kind of small. And that makes sense because I got to turn my head pretty fast when I want to look at things, or look at danger, or look at something interesting. So those are cervical vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae, since we have 12 ribs, you got to have 12 of those. Oh, by the way, here's your scapula, which is your shoulder blade, which is part of your shoulder girdle. I'm going to talk about more of that in a minute. So the thorax, your thoracic cage, or your rib cage, there's 12 ribs, therefore there should be 12 thoracic vertebrae. You can see the vertebrae here. And you can see the vertebrae here have these facets. See that part right there? That's called a facet. It connects to the rib. Okay? And then if you look at your lumbar, you see the body, it's much thicker, and you see that brown, that is your intervertebral disc. That, the whitish brown, that is, or beige color, that is a cartilage. The rest of all of this is, of course, bone. And then you have your fused bone. Let's move this a little bit. This is a single fused bone, and that's called your sacrum. And then the very bone at the very, very end, let me highlight it. That is called your coccyx. Okay? So to recap, cervical, 7 of them, neck, thoracic, part of your rib cage, lumbar, lower back, sacral, fused, and the one in the very, very end is your coccyx. And that should outline your vertebrae. Now let's look at the pelvis. Let's look at the frontal view. And of course we see our pelvis here. Now your pelvis, there's like 3 parts to it. And let's make it a little bit, let's make my patient a little bit smaller so I can move him up a little and turn him around a little bit. So if you see this part, that's your ilium. You can see right on the edge there, that's your iliac crest. So that's your ilium. Then you have this part here, which is the front part. That's your pubis. And then there's a ring, or like there's a circle, and then there's a back part, and that's your ischium. So you have your ilium, your pubis, which is in the front, and it's like part of this donut thing. So this is the front part of the donut, or the hole. It's called the obturator for Raymond, because your obturator nerve runs through there, right? And that's your pubis, and then your ischium. Okay, and you see this cartilage in the middle here? And we know it's male because look how thin, you know? If you compare this to a female, the pelvic inlet would be much, much wider. And the pubic symphysis right here, that's that little piece of cartilage that brings the 2 sides of the hip together. Sorry, I forgot that we were talking about hip. So you have your ilium, you have your ischium, and you have your, if you will cooperate with me, pubis. And those are your parts of your pelvis. Tib fib, that's your lower leg. You guys can find that. Calcaneus is your heel. You can find that. Patella is your kneecap. You can find that. Now, phalanges. Phalanges are either fingers or toes, and we call them fingers or toes. Like if it's phalanges upper extremity, that means it's fingers. It's phalanges lower extremity, that means it's toes. We label digits clinically, like the thumb is 1, pointing fingers 2, middle fingers 3, ring fingers 4, and your pinky is 5. Same thing with your toes. Your toes, your big toe is labeled a digit number 1, and pinky, of course, pinky toe is digit number 5. So you could, like, let's say I broke my thumb on my left hand. That means I broke my digit number 1, upper extremity, phalanges, left. Right? That's how we would do it. You saw the scapula, which is the posterior part of the shoulder girdle, and the clavicle, which is your collarbone, which is the front part. And this is important to notice because the next part we're going to be talking about, and you could erase all annotations, that's nice. The next topic, or the last part of this, is do you know appendicular versus axial skeleton? So that'll come out, and I'm going to change that word. Well, apical is another word for it, but your textbook and everything says axial as well. Because when you spin on your axis, it's everything in the middle. And appendicular means appendages. So if you're looking at the bones, you know what? Let's look at a better picture here. Maybe always ask the mighty Google. So I can do a search, I can go through images, and I have a wonderful picture here. So let's look at this. So if you're looking at the left, which is blue, that is your appendicular skeletal system. And if you notice, it includes the clavicle and your scapula, which is part of the shoulder girdle. A girdle is anything that wraps around, and your shoulder wraps around, and those bones wraps around to help articulate your arm. If anyone's ever had any broken bones, you know that if you bust your clavicle, I busted up my clavicle left, I could not move my left arm for a while. And that's part of your appendages. And you can see here your carpals, the square bones in your wrist, and then you have your phalanges, upper extremity. And your hips, remember your ilium, ischium, and pubis are also part of your appendicular skeletal system. Right? Now, what's the axial skeletal system? Anything in the skull, vertebrae, or thoracic cage. So I could ask, your manubrium sternum, oh, that's axial. The frontal bone on your skull, that's what? Axial. Your sacrum, that's axial. Your coccyx, axial. Your fifth rib, axial. Okay? So this is a nice view right here. Right? The one on the left in blue, appendicular. The one on the right, axial. Okay. So on exam time, let's say let's color some stuff. I could ask on an exam time, identify the bone in red, and you'll tell me, oh, that's my mandible. And then I could ask, is it axial or appendicular? Is it part of the axial or part of the appendicular skeletal system? And you'll tell me, oh, it goes, that's part of the axial. What's this in pink? You'll tell me, oh, that's my humerus, and it's part of my appendages, so it's got to be what? Appendicular. All right? So let's look at our instructions. I think we're done. All right. And this will save us some time if you watch this video, and I will make I will make all the little boo-boos. I'll fix these, and then of course publish this video. So I'll see you guys on Friday. Have a good one. Bye.